Topping D90 III Discrete is quite different from any DAC that Topping has ever made, because it is not based on some off-the-shelf DAC chip coming from AKM or Sabre or Cirrus Logic, etc., but instead it uses Topping-developed discrete circuitry, and it's based on 1-bit design, and from what Topping is saying about it, it seems that it is a series of 1-bit converters. And that's something that resembles quite a bit to what Chord is doing with their DACs. Chord calls that pulse array, and it is a pulse array of 1-bit converters that are phase delayed, and Topping is also calling this 1-bit converter, and they're also mentioning 16 phases per polarity in this DAC. So a lot of phrases and ideas resemble there. And Topping even made this glass darkened window that you cannot easily see probably on camera, but inside of it you can see that discrete circuit that is doing DA conversion instead of like a regular chip that Topping always used before. And how is that influencing the sound? We'll talk about that very soon. For now I just wanted to go over a few details. This DAC looks exactly the same like all other D90 flagships that came before. As you can see, the front panel is the same, this monochromatic OLED display is the same. In the back, all the digital inputs that you can imagine are there. I will not name them one by one. It's boring stuff for DACs that do not have anything else to talk about. But here we do have. One thing that is different and interesting is that the remote control is Bluetooth now. And that means that you do not have to point exactly at the unit like you did have with some previous DACs, but it picks up the signal from the remote really well no matter where you point it. One quirk comes with it too. Bluetooth consumes more battery than infrared technology, and because of that, remote goes into sleep basically. And after not using it for some time, when you first press a button, it will take a second or something like that for it to wake up and actually start reacting. But after that, everything works really well. Interesting thing number 2 is that this DAC features internal DSP that enables you to use parametric equalizer, or PEC for short. And you do that by connecting the DAC via USB to your PC, downloading Topping app that looks nice. It has like graphical representation of your PEC curves, and you can adjust any curve that you want, and you can save it inside of the DAC. Up to 10 profiles are supported, and once you adjust them and save them over your PC, you can circle, enable, or fully disable them just using your remote or a volume knob on the DAC. But there are 2 limitations you have to know about using PEC. First one is that it can work maximum up to 192 kHz files. If it's above that, PEC cannot be applied. Also, the I2S input is not supported. Everything else, USB, coaxial, optical, etc. is, but I2S cannot be routed through the DSP and parametric equalizer. That said, I've tried it. It works as well as you would expect from a good PEC implementation. At first, I even thought that there are no penalties to the sound of the DAC, but after listening to it more carefully, yes, there is a small decrease in just overall sound fidelity and crispiness and punchiness if PEC is used. But if you really need it, if you need to correct some tonal flaws on your headphones or in your room, it's a useful tool to have. And what else to say aside from that? It's still a Topping device. They still value good topology and good measurements above everything else. So you don't get some big fancy linear power supply. They instead use internal small switching power supply that is more efficient, consumes less power. Also, like if you look inside of the unit, you will not find some fancy capacitors or fancy wiring and connector materials. Topping is not about that. As I said, they're about great engineering. All of that said and done, let's talk about how it actually performs. Starting with tonality, it sounds very neutral and very tonally flat. You never notice that any part of the frequency spectrum is emphasized or just made warmer or lusher for the sake of being more pleasant and easier on the ears. Toppings simply sound very neutral tonally. And then another thing that is, best topping fashion is how revealing and actually high resolution this DAC sounds. And if you know anything about topping flagship DACs like D90 III Sabre and before it LE and SE, they are really high resolution DACs. But this one is even more revealing than those were. The tiniest of details and even more inner tone texture than any topping before it. And it's even faster, even snappier. It outlines everything with even greater clarity than before. So everything that topping already did great, this DAC is doing equally great or even better. But luckily, some things are improved in a way that ascends what topping has been able to do before. For example, sound staging. Soundstage with D90 III Discrete is really wide, it's even really deep and has deep dark background. Tones emerge from it really clean, really defined and outlined, well separated from each other, pinpointed in a 3D space with great precision, with great stability. But here's the thing, this big and wide and deep soundstage is not presented in a way that you would expect from an R2R DAC that has huge soundstage but also big, bold individual instruments that feel fat and full inside of that big soundstage. Here we are talking about big, airy, with a dark, deep background soundstage, but tones are actually more focused, leaner and more precise inside of that big soundstage. Because of that, distinction from individual tones is fantastic. This thing is super clean sounding. And in a way, the sound of D90 III Discrete reminds me more on how Chord Cutest sounded, for example. It also created that big soundstage with deep dark background and precise pinpointing and 3D of everything that is presented in a soundstage. And topping does that very similar to Chord Cutest and not to big, diffused, lush and full sounding R2Rs. But note this, to my ears, D90 III Discrete actually sounds better than the Chord Cutest because it has even greater resolution, inner tone textures and inner tone detailing like huskiness and just the smallest of the transients around and before and after main tone are presented to greater clarity and in more details than Chord Cutest actually did. From what I remember, I did not compare them directly. Also, topping does sound snappier, punchier, more vigorous, where Cutest was lean, precise and three-dimensional, but kinda laid back and dynamically a bit mild. It's not the case with topping. When it punches, it punches. It's really snappy, forward, vigorous sounding DAC. But that said, how it compares to some of the best DACs on the market right now. For that, I'll start with SMSL SU-10, which has been my favorite DAC and my reference below 1,000 euros or 1,000 US dollars for almost 2 years, or maybe full 2 years now. Some other DACs managed to go head to head with it, but none below 1,000 actually sounded, overall speaking, better than SU-10. And I kept it as a reference that I compare everything else with. And now I have to say that for the first time ever, something below 1000 is actually outperforming SU-10. In a way that D90 III Discrete is definitely a higher resolution DAC. It can dig more details, small transients, quick transients, just snappiness, dynamics, all of that is higher than what SU-10 can achieve. However, SU-10 is tonally different, and it is fuller sounding, warmer sounding in the bass, in the mid-bass, and in the mid-range. And because of that, some tones can sometimes sound plumpier, and you might prefer that. But SU-10 is also softer. It's softer with its detailing, with outlining the edges of everything that you hear, and it just hazes and muddies things a bit more than Topping D90 III Discrete here. When it comes to sound staging, SU-10 is really wide sounding, and they're quite comparable in that regard. But SU-10 cannot match this deep, inky dark background of D90 III Discrete. Also, it cannot match this precise pinpointing and separating things. Everything with SU-10 is a bit wider and hazier inside of that soundstage. So tones like vocals and instruments can overlap a bit, and boundaries between them are not as clear as with Topping. Dynamics, snappiness, vigor is also higher with D90 III Discrete. So objectively speaking, and it's also how I feel, D90 III Discrete is a better sounding DAC, and is currently the best DAC below 1000 that I've ever heard. However, don't get me wrong, you can still love SU-10 more. You can prefer it to Topping if that's warm tonality, that softness and mildness is what you personally like and what matches better with your system. But objectively speaking, this Topping is a better DAC, and unlike D90 III Sabre that could not overcome SU-10, they were roughly on pair, some equal qualities, different tonalities. Overall speaking, I prefer the SU-10, and D90 III Discrete sounds as a DAC that is a tier above what SU-10 is offering. That leads me to the next comparison with Holo Audio Cyan 2. That is a slightly pricier DAC that has much less features and functionalities. Now, Holo Audio Cyan 2 is a warmer and softer and milder sounding DAC. In terms of its tonality and presentation, it's actually much closer to this SMSL SU-10 that I've just mentioned. But with higher resolution, deeper sound staging, more detail retrieval, and just better punchier and firmer bass. And all of that lifts Cyan 2 to a tier above to my ears. So when you compare these two directly, they are exchanging punches. For example, the absolute clarity and pinpointing and how clean and dark the background is, Topping is having an advantage. It's a cleaner sounding DAC. It's also snappier, more dynamic sounding DAC. It goes about transients with fantastic speed that makes Cyan 2 sound a bit soft and sluggish in a direct comparison. And Cyan 2 is not a sluggish DAC at all. It's actually very precise, very fast sounding DAC, but Topping D90 III Discrete makes it sound a bit sluggish and mild. On the other hand, Cyan 2 has lusher and softer, in a good way softer, and somehow more natural sounding mid-range. So for example, if I listen to some of my favorite songs, country, blues, jazz, vocals and saxophones will sound just fuller, lusher, more natural and more relaxed. Topping will make all of that sound equally revealing, and the inner tone texture will be quite well revealed too, something that maybe previous Toppings lacked. But by making all of these tones much more focused and more energetic and snappier, some refinement is gone. Sometimes Topping simply sounds analytical, for better and for worse. And that is really good, for example, for me personally, if I listen to some electronic music, like Daft Punk, or just energetic pop music, or really engaging rock and roll and things like that, I like the vigor, the punch, the snappiness of Topping. But move to these milder genres, country, jazz, blues, and I miss fullness and lushness of the mid-range that Cyan 2 can do. So they do have different qualities. Strictly technically speaking, Topping D90 III Discrete is faster, more precise, punchier sounding. Sound staging is quite similar with these two, which is something that I did not expect. Topping is creating equally deep soundstage, maybe slightly narrower than Holo Audio Cyan 2, but for most intensities and purposes, these two soundstage pretty much the same. But as I said, while Cyan 2 is an R2R DAC that makes vocals and instruments sound bigger and lusher, Topping makes them leaner, more focused, outlined better and more precise. And depending on your own taste, your music preferences, and matching with the rest of your system, you can easily prefer Topping D90 III Discrete to Cyan 2, but it can also go the other way around. And with that, there is no help that I can provide. You simply have to feel which one of these you think you would like more and you think would match better with your system. If you let me choose from any DAC that I've ever reviewed on this channel up to $2,000, I would probably have to give first place to Cyan 2 and Topping D90 III Discrete to share it. Really close to these two would be Gustard R26, then a Fripp Series 15th, etc., but I think, and to my ears, these two DACs are the best that you can buy up to $2,000. And the first DAC that I've personally compared it to directly that actually sounded just better to me was Live Harmony DAC. In the review of Holo Cyan 2, I said that Cyan 2 is quite close to Live Harmony, but I was wrong. After even more detailed comparisons and having the best possible cables and connections and settings on both of these, Live Harmony is a tier above both Cyan 2 and Topping D90 III Discrete. It sounds bigger, lusher, just even wider and fuller and with even more inner tone detailing, but it's a $2,700 DAC. And this Topping can match it in some aspects, like shear detail retrieval, dynamics, and just speed. And having in mind that it's a $999 DAC, that means it's a fantastic value. It's a fantastic value DAC. And I was thinking this, if Topping made this one, but in a bigger, more beautiful, heavier casing, with like some fancy luxury premium materials and remote and story behind it, and like very recognizable old school name and brand behind it, they could sell this DAC for several thousands, and if somebody bought it, they would be impressed with everything that this DAC is doing fantastically. This analytical nature of a DAC would be described as unforgiving because, yeah, this is like a high-end DAC that is immensely revealing and it's unforgiving. If you want to have this level of quality, you have to adjust the rest of your system slightly to this new found clarity and crispiness. And it would be looked in a more positive way. I firmly believe that because that's just how people think and what they say. But because it's Topping, I bet that some of those same people that would rave about performance of this DAC in a much more premium enclosure and with a more premium price tag, they would focus on these slight shortcomings much more and pick them out as negatives and say like, yeah, it's topping. But some of us are so awesome that we are not biased by such worldly things. I can hear that this DAC is an A tier, maybe not S tier. There are some shortcomings, but it's an A tier sound. It's an A tier gain for $9.99. What it does well, it does super well. And I think it could easily go head-to-head with some much pricier Matrix audio DACs or Lindemann DACs, etc. that I've heard throughout my career and just me doing this hobby. And it would go head-to-head with some of these super revealing and analytically inclined DACs, but it's doing that with a lower price tag. That said, if you're okay with the Topping sound signature and its tonality, this one has an easy recommendation from me. And that would be all for today, guys. I hope you liked the video. See you next time.